All right, so good evening, everyone. I will call the Southborough Capital Planning Committee to order. It is 7:32 p.m. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting, the Southborough Capital Planning Committee, will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we'll post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. So good evening, everyone. I'll just note for capital planning, all members are present except for Mr. Hinterneeder, who's going to join after the joint meeting with Shopsy, and Mr. Purple will not be able to attend tonight. And then Shopsy does have a joint meeting posted with us, but they do not have a quorum, so don't think there's any action on your part, Dorianne. So I think let's jump right in. So I think we all know where the South Union building ended up in terms of town meeting, that it was indefinitely postponed. The bid was withdrawn. But I think as part of that process, as everyone remembers, is, the town took a different path on this project in particular than had been taken in the past in terms of soliciting bids to see what the value may be, as opposed to prior projects where the Board of Selectmen sought authorization to dispose of the property and then, took it upon themselves to negotiate the best deal that they thought in the interest of the town, given the property, et cetera. Taking into account all the feedback that I know I received and saw in various forums, it was very clear to me that there was an appetite from the community, especially in light of the ARPA funds developments in the identification of affordable housing as a key component of that. And I think, I'll be very clear. I think the definitions are still evolving, but it's clear that that could be a potential priority of those funds and how they're used. And that guidance dropped on the same day that the Board of Selectmen were at least initially digesting, the proposal that was received. So what I did is I reached out to Dorian as chair of Shopsy to at least see if they wanted to meet with us. And while we're kind of in a pause, see if they wanted to work with us to at least investigate the viability of affordable housing on that parcel, whether it be some combination of the existing building and new buildings, but really set up some sort of subcommittee that could go off and run with it. It's obviously not something that two committees are going to run in parallel stream with full memberships on, but really see, one, if there was an appetite from capital planning, two, if there was an appetite from Shopsy to do something like that, and if there was, identify member or members and that could work on a subcommittee charge for the Board of Selectmen to ultimately approve and come up with some clear guidance on timing of when that working group could come back with possibilities of or what ifs. So again, it was really just listening to feedback and wanting to bring it forward. And I guess Dorian, maybe before I open up to capital planning, if you have any thoughts as chair of Shopsy of what you're thinking and any proposed next steps that you would take back to your committee.
First of all, thank you for having us tonight. We're very interested as a board in getting something done for housing. We've worked very diligently and very hard to get our housing production plan completed. We've received a $15,000 grant to get a strategy plan together for 5 years. Right now, we're slated to hopefully have that completed in January. So we're trying to move forward as quickly as we can. And we're looking at creating a possibility of a Southville overlay district in that area. I was thinking maybe a little bit larger than that, but what I don't want to do is have a negative impact on the homes that are there or to disrupt the quality of life of those homeowners. So taking a look at that and the area down there, I've driven in the area with Sarah several times. I've looked at the property. I think that would afford us an opportunity that it's just a great fit, I think, for affordable housing, maybe using the school for a few units and then fitting a few more in that area. So we're very open. Shopsy is very open to looking at anything that can get some affordable housing in town. So we're looking forward to this opportunity.
Okay. Maybe I'll open it up. Hi, Mr. Wood. Thanks for joining. Doreen, you're still not at a quorum, right? With 3?
No, we need 4 for a quorum.
Okay. So maybe I'll just open up to members of capital planning. What I guess like to understand is whether you think it's worth exploring, and B, whether any of you have any interest in joining up with members of Shopsy to form the subcommittee if you are interested in exploring the topic. So maybe Andrew, I'll start with you.
Yes, I mean, I'd certainly be interested if you need my help on that. I think, as Dorian was talking about, I think the commuter rail transit multi-housing by right zoning piece that we need to keep our Mass Works grants ability is something that I'd like to wrap into that kind of conversation as for that parcel or the parcel and the parcel next to it, just to think it would qualify. So I think it's kind of a combo, kind of a zoning plus an affordable housing at the same time.
Okay, Joe.
In terms of committee, my interest is pretty moderate, but I'm very interested in seeing what they might plan to put there.
Jeff.
Knowing how much work the building needs, I guess I'm kind of interested in understanding what our plans would be to fund that per se. I guess I'm not sure I understand how the structure works. If it's affordable housing, does the town own it, or is it sold to interested parties? Or I guess I don't know how that process works and how that would relate to some of the known work that the building needs. Maybe that's not the forum for tonight, but that's just kind of going on in the back of my mind. Sorry.
I think that's certainly something that would have to be explored as part of any work. But I don't know, Dorian, if you or any members of the Affordable Housing Trust, because I know 2 Board of Selectmen are here, as one is a member of capital planning and one is a member of Shopsy. If you have any response to that question, that may be helpful.
Well, the money's going to comes from a couple of sources. So there's CPC housing bucket where money would come from, and we have the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which also has funds. The town would not own it. It depends on how I guess we set it up. But we've talked to like Habitat for Humanity about doing a joint project with them. I think what we would do is something similar to Stockwell Lane, and Lisa and Chelsea jump in on this, where we would sell the property to an individual homeowner and they would take it from there. And then when they went to move or sell it, we have right of first refusal and we would resell it. But the DHCD is the one that controls the pricing aspect. So there's a lot of moving parts on this type of housing. So I don't have all the answers because I'm not an expert. I'm learning as I go day by day. You can ask my board that. I'm always trying to educate them and myself with what we can and can't do. but Lisa's the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, so she might be able to answer more questions than I am capable of.
So I will, Dorian, thank you. I'll just add to that. So there is certainly the possibility, depending how it's set up, to be able to resell the units. The difference in this and Stockwell was built by the developer, and it was a condition of the subdivision that they had to include the affordable units, and they had to meld in with the neighborhood as well. So I think there's different paths, Jeff, that could be done with this. There's groups out of through, I know there's one in Gloucester that they'll actually come in. If the town contributes something, they'll come in, they will build it, they will take care of it, the units will be sold. They've done it in the past. It's a very tasteful ways. But again, I think there's, as Dorian said, there's a lot of different options as to how this can be done, who would do it. But I think that the town is really not a good landlord per se. And so I think there's a lot of areas to explore as to how we could get that done. Dorian is right. There is money in the Affordable Housing Trust, and there's money through CPC. I don't know if that would be enough. I don't think it would be enough for the town to actually build something per se, but we could certainly partner with somebody to get something done, and to, as we explore if this is an avenue that we'd like to do, then I think there's enough exploration out there that we could find a partner. So I don't know if that was helpful, Jeff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you.
So John, I'll get you 1 second. Just final question for Jeff is any interest if we were to form a subcommittee?
I mean, I just don't think I can commit at this point. Unfortunately, I mean, always interested to help, but at this junction, no. Sorry.
Okay. All right. John, before I go to Lisa, do you have something you want to add? I see your hands up.
For funding, there's state funding available as well. What Northborough did, the director, I'm also on the Housing Authority, and the director of the Housing Authority in Southborough is also the director of the Housing Authority in Northborough. And Northborough donated some land, and then the state came in and the Housing Authority matched funds, and you could actually get grant money. At one time, you could, if you were building a 2-bedroom unit, you could get like 115,000. If it was a 1-bedroom unit, you could get like $75,000 a unit. I don't know if that's still out there, but this is when I was talking to Lynn a few months back about it, just in case something like this came up. And then what happens is the state winds up taking over. You get the census, you get the towards your 10% affordable housing. The state takes over, it handles the rent, all the property management, things like, just like they do on Colonial Gardens on Boston Post Road. So that's an option as well. I mean, the biggest thing is getting the land from the town and the building, and then after that, it's just a matter of creative writing on where you want to go to try to get grant money from the state, but it's out there.
What kind of control does the state then have?
Just like are you familiar with Colonial Gardens on Boston Post Road across from St. Anne's? Those apartments down there, that's Housing Authority housing, and they own it and run it, and you get preference for residents and veterans and stuff, I believe, to get in there when they're looking for it. At least you used to. And it helps with the disabled, the elderly, and the state does everything. Like if it needs maintenance, it comes out of the DCHD budget. If it needs this, it comes out of their budget. So basically we get it built, and then get all the perks of it without any of the expense.
But we would then lose
Potentially.
control. But we would then lose a control of the property. I mean, in private sale, we would lose control, and that's okay.
Yes.
We have ordinances that apply. Are town ordinances then suspended because of the state control?
So John, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it is owned by the Southborough Housing Authority. It's just managed by the state.
Yes.
And you put a capital plan together and you get funding every year for new kitchens or new floors and that kind of thing. So Joe, it's more like we kind of turn over control in terms of management of it, but the Southborough Housing Authority, entity owns it as a nonprofit. And then, that's the people we vote for to be elected onto that authority.
Exactly.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your much better answer than I had, Andrew.
Lisa, anything you want to add?
So I'm not going to add anything else, Jason, only because I know Chelsea and I are here and Sam is actually in the room on the other side. So I don't necessarily want to run into a quorum issue, other than I will just share that I had updated the board that these discussions were going to be taking place. So, and the board seemed on a straw poll, basically, as relatively supportive to hear what comes back. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
So I guess, Dorian, over to you. Do you have any sense of how many members on your committee you would suggest, like, helping to explore this?
I was going to suggest 2 members. I don't think I would want to commit more than that. Everyone has their jobs. The world's starting to get back to normal, and I think everyone's playing catch up. So I don't want to over stress my board, because they're pretty terrific people. So I'm thinking 2 should be able to do a good job. If you could offer 2, I think between the 4 people, they could probably come up with some help anyway, and how we can handle this.
Go ahead, John. I see you.
Do you think you'd need somebody from planning as well? Or when it might be not a bad idea to have at least invite either Sarah or Karina that might be able to tell us the different zoning challenges and things like that. That kind of aspect might be helpful as well.
Or Jesse as the rep, maybe, for Shopsy.
I had put a phone call into Jesse. Sarah and Karina are really inundated right now. They are in very, very deep with everything else that's going on. And there's a lot of stuff coming down the pike for them. So I don't think I think we can always go to them and ask them for advice, but I would not be comfortable asking them to commit to a lot more time on yet another subcommittee or a board or anything.
But I guess
that's my opinion.
I guess to that point, if Jesse does not have the capacity, is there a reach out to at least Dawn and the planning board to see if anyone else on planning wants to assist, even if they don't necessarily sit on Shopsy
We can.
or Capital? Okay. They can always say no, right?
It's always good to invite as well, even if they don't want to say no. You don't want to seem like you intentionally excluded.
I asked Jesse because he was on Shopsy.
Yeah,
So
no, that makes perfect sense.
a dual member.
Okay, so unless I miss, and I do not have the capacity to assist on this, given the school stuff that's coming down the pike. So I heard Andrew volunteer. I did not hear anyone else from capital planning volunteer. Did I have that right?
I'll pick it up.
Okay.
I'd be more of a learning partner here, but
Okay.
Learning is good.
All right. So I'm going to move that the Capital Planning Committee support a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that Joe Palmer and Andrew Pfaff serve as our representatives for any exploratory subcommittees related to South Union affordable housing.
Second.
I heard Lisa. Any further discussion? All right. We need to do a roll call. So Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. All right, so that's our membership. Dorian, I guess you can't really do anything on your membership tonight, but
No.
whenever you can put those names forward, obviously, we can probably bundle a package for the board to ultimately make a decision. How do we want to deal with a charge? I don't think it has to be very long. I think the intent is there and should be broad, but does someone want to volunteer to draft something and submit it to the BOS? Dorian, do you want that to be from your committee? Do you want it to be from our committee? I'm completely indifferent. I just obviously am looking to advance this if given the discussion here.
I'm happy to try to put something together, but I've never done that before. So I don't know. I mean, I can ask Lisa to help me on it when she gets back from vacation. I could try to throw something together and work with maybe Sarah or John to try to pull something together for the BOS. You can help me, right, John?
Jason, is your intent also for whoever creates the charge that both committees will have input on before it goes to the BOS?
Yeah, I would think someone challenged me on this if this is incorrect, but given that there's no subcommittee created, we could have one member of capital planning work with one member of Shopsy to come up with the charge. and then that charge goes to the BOS. Given how broad I would expect it's going to be, and we've agreed on membership, I don't see a need for capital planning to re-vote a charge. It's really a subcommittee. And I guess the question is, which committee are you setting it up as a subcommittee of? I'm completely indifferent of where it sits. I just want to, again, help advance conversations.
I'd recommend it under SHOPSy, just by the nature of what we're trying to do there.
Okay.
That's just my suggestion.
So, Andrew, you have experience with charges. So I would say, Dorian, if you need anything from capital planning as you start to draft that,
Okay.
I'd
Reach
go
out
to Andrew.
Dorian, we can write it together. Oh, wait, no worries.
I could call Annie.
And Andrew, I would suggest the school research subcommittee charge that's currently out there and just broaden it. Obviously, very different content, but it probably has the framework you need, given that has school committee members, capital planning members, et cetera.
And do we want to specify in that membership of, a member of the planning board, a member of the housing authority, and a member of SHOPSy? Or just 3 SHOPSy, or,
I think Dorian said 2 SHOPSy. We just voted 2 capital planning. And then if planning wants to send a member and it's not Jesse who's on SHOPSy.
It's not going to be Jesse. He just
Okay.
texted me. He's stretched out way too thin.
Okay. So I would say a planning board this is my recommendation, is a planning board member if they want to appoint someone, but if they don't, I think you make it a 4-person committee. And I know you don't usually like even number committees, but that way it's equal representation. And if there are differing opinions, it then allows for the right level of conversation. But hopefully it's a 4-0 vote and off they go with whatever recommendations. I don't know, that's my opinion. I welcome others.
if there is a zoning component, do we need, that would be covered by planning, right? Because they would hold the hearings, not ZBA. Is that right? Do I have that right?
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, I think you're also looking to figure out what's possible, right? To answer something like Jeff's question, right, was, what are the possibilities, right? Because then how does that then dovetail into what has to be done from a transit, overlay, regardless of what happens in South Union, right? So I think there's many different ways, right? And it could morph into other things is probably, a potential outcome, but I guess I don't know. I think you got to start somewhere, right? Is what are the possibilities, and at least start to throw darts at a wall and figure out which stick.
Yeah.
I was actually speaking to Karina a little bit today about the one stop and on the housing aspect of it, because they hadn't checked off some of the boxes. Duplexes are by special permit only, I believe, over there. So I don't know if you'd want to do like say you put something. I don't know if a multi-unit in that building would quantify for more than just a special permit. Would that need a bylaw change? But if you might not even, there might not really be too many zoning changes. It'd just be special permits around there, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. I mean, the overlay technically would allow 15 units per acre, but.
Yeah, but we don't have sewer. We have septic, so that's not going to fly.
Yeah, but you can put a decent.
We talked to our MIPA rep, the person who's helping us with our 5-year strategic plan, and he did tell Sarah that's not going to work for us because you'd have to have sewer. You can't put 15 units on an acre. So that's a 4-acre parcel. So we have a little bit of a discrepancy with the parcel. The building inspectors, mapping, I have everything here in front of me. They say it's 4.2 acres. And the assessor's office is 3 acres. And Paul believes that it's probably closer to the 4.2 acres, but it's going to have to be surveyed because no one really knows. There's no as-built plans. There's nothing in any files anywhere. They have very, very limited information on this property. So we can't put 60 units over there. That would destroy the neighborhood.
Do you know what
we have to build something that's going to not affect the quality of life of the neighbors.
Yeah, you're still limited to Title V as part of that.
Right.
Just technically by right. If there was a sewer there, they could, but you're still limited by 10.
I'm curious
So-
to what the septic system is designed for now, where it was a school, how many gallons? It might be a fairly decent septic system already on that property because it was a school.
So John, I think these are great questions for the subcommittee.
Nope, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Already looked
You're
at
going
that.
down the rabbit hole too early. We'll hold
Yeah.
off.
Looked at it.
All right, so path forward is capital has recommended members, obviously subject to BOS appointment. Andrew and Dorian will work on a charge with goal of, I guess, having it for the BOS meeting in a couple weeks. And then obviously that subcommittee can set their own schedule from there.
Just as reference, Jason, the BOS is meeting on the 15th. So if there's any way to get it done and get it approved by then the committee could start their work.
Okay. And then Andrew and Joe, what I will do on our agendas is similar to what we've done with the school research, is just provide in our main capital planning meetings moving forward, a standing update for you to just, could be nothing, it could be a lot, just update on the progress back to the broader committee.
Shopsy's not meeting until the 16th. So I think what I'll do is I'll send out an email to my board members, asking them not to reply to me only, not to the committee, and let me know if they'd be interested in working on the subcommittee, because we're not going to be able to vote them in officially until the 16th, but at least I'll have an idea of who wants to be on the committee. But you won't get an official vote from us until the 16th at our meeting, so sorry.
And Dorian, will you reach out to Don Morris in the planning board,
Yes.
given Jesse's response? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. All right, is there anything else before we let our friends from Shopsy go? All right. I appreciate you all joining and look forward to the collaboration.
Thank you for having us. Good night,
Thank you.
everybody. Have a great
Good
weekend.
night. Everybody take care.
Bye.
Lisa, have a great vacation.
Thank you.
So I just need to do some work here on my, Andrew, did you reach out to Steve to let him know? Okay, I'll give him a minute to join. We're going to go into the minutes next, just so everyone's prepared. We got 2 sets of minutes to look at.
Hello.
Steve, how are you?
Great, thank you.
All right, we are on to agenda item 3, approval of meeting minutes from May 10th, 2021 and May 13th, 2021. So the May 10th minutes were joint with the BOS. Does anyone have comments for Jeff? Lisa, has BOS approved these minutes yet?
No.
Okay.
They haven't drafted. I haven't seen the draft yet either. So
So these are yours?
these are my interpretation of the meeting.
Okay. I have some edits, but I guess I wasn't sure whether these were BOS drafted or yours. So, Lisa, do you know when BOS is planning to take action on your minutes?
I would hope the 15th. We definitely aren't the 8th, but
Okay.
either the 15th or the next meeting after that is the 13th of July. So maybe one of the two.
Okay. So I'd prefer to wait on these ones. And just, I'm always cognizant when there's two boards meeting, I'd like to at least see the other ones so we don't have any sort of discrepancies. So I guess at least if there's a draft available, I don't know if we necessarily need the BOS to approve them, but at least make sure that the content is similar in nature, I think is important for both boards or board and committee.
Jason, I can follow up tomorrow and I can see when they'll be done and then
Okay.
We can get them forwarded over in draft form.
Okay. Do you agree with that approach, Lisa? Okay. So then we also had the May 13th minutes. Did anyone have any comments on those? I guess my only comment was we took the meeting out of order. So I think the minutes were drafted in the order of the agenda as opposed to the order of the meeting. So if we could just adjust that, then I was fine with the content.
You want me to move section B to the end?
That's the order it happened in.
Okay, yeah, all right, that's fine.
There any other questions, comments?
Just a typo, Jeff, at the top of the second page. It's MF Palmer instead of Mr. Oh, that's it.
Oh. Thank you. No offense is
Sorry,
meant for that.
Sorry,
show.
Joe.
It would have been fine. I take that very well.
All right. So I'm going to move that we accept the May 13th, 2021 meeting minutes with the two mentioned changes discussed during this evening. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right. Roll call. Brascio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
Hinterneeder,
Aye.
and Malinowski's aye. Sorry, Steve, you dropped to the bottom of my screen because of the alphabet
Understood.
somehow. All right. We're going to move on to DPW request on yard tractor. So at the BOS meeting, as everyone knows, there's a new capital planning policy this year, but there's also a new financial policy that basically requires at least notification when departments are going to exceed certain line items in their budget, as opposed to bottom line spending their budget, right? So if you had a $100 budget, but it was comprised of 4 $25 items, there are certain thresholds that department heads are now having to work within based on policies that the BOS adopted. Karen Galligan went to the BOS the other night. Her budget was essentially out of whack this year due to a mechanic that left, which they had to use contracted services for as opposed to salaries. So you can imagine contracted services line was way over, the salaries line was way under, and it led to a ripple effect of many items being over and under with a net positive, i.e. much more favorable to the town than where the budget was in terms of potential savings. But there was one unexpected item that her department was dealing with related to a DPW yard tractor. And I'm going to try to summarize the facts as best I can. But the punchline here is there's a repair that requires $15,000 of expenditure, which then trips the capital policy, even though it's going to be funded within an operating budget. So the goal tonight, after I give you the facts, is if we support it, to just send support that we think it's the right use of funding from a capital perspective. And I believe the BOS has already voted to allow for, I'll call it bottom line spending, or a intra-department transfer within her line items. So with that, the big picture is they have a yard tractor that's a 2009 Mack. It has 64,300 miles on it. That truck transfers stuff from the transfer station to Wheelabrator, which, as everyone knows, is kind of where our trash goes. That means it's going out on the interstates. They also have a 1986 Mack that is used as what they call a yard tractor. It has 169,750 miles on it. That unit requires the 15K in repairs. It's used to move things around in the yard. My understanding is it doesn't regularly leave the facility on Corderville Road, but it is a backup nonetheless. So Karen also indicated that she does not anticipate replacing the frontline Mac, i.e. the 2009 version, until 2033. So it's not even on our current purview of the capital plan, just the big picture. So she believes that the 15,000 on the 1986 Mac is an appropriate use of funds to allow them to continue to use this Mac within the confines of Corderville Road, and is looking for approval along those lines. My initial reaction was the fact that we still have something from 1986 is, I thought there were a few typos. They weren't typos. Mark confirmed as well. But those are real dates. So my personal view is it sounds like it's the right answer because you're looking at, hundreds of thousands to replace if you were to accelerate it. But I do think we need to have a conversation over the summer of whether 2033 is the right date for the frontline vehicle to be on the capital plan, because I don't really think we're going to get another 10 years out of a 1986 vehicle, even with this repair. Just sounds too optimistic to me. I'm happy to be proven wrong, but 1986 was a long time ago. So I'll pause. I don't know if anyone, I'm not going to necessarily go around the horn unless everyone, I don't know if anyone has any thoughts, questions, comments, concern.
All I'll say, Jason, is 1986 for some of us wasn't that long ago.
For all of us, it was the same amount of time.
I don't know. I could have driven that tractor back in '86. So
Jason, I think, my only thing is that I just did some Googling. That truck you could buy that truck for $15,000. And there's, you could buy a 2012 Mack cab truck for $19,000. I'm just wondering if we're better off using, spending a little bit more and just buying something that's maybe 20 years newer to have around here with a little bit extra funds. Here's one for sale at Ballard Truck Center in Worcester for $19,500 for a 2012 Mack. I don't know, similar model, but something to think about.
I think Mack is a very general term. I am no truck expert, so I'm happy to take that suggestion back to Karen, but I don't know that I could personally weigh in on that any further. I don't know how much it's supposed to be able to tow. I mean, unfortunately, Karen wasn't able to join, but
do we know if they can use the existing equipment while we debate this repair cost or replacement?
I'm not sure how sidelined the asset is. I wouldn't be in support of putting any more money into it after this, I'll tell you that. I guess, am I hearing or reading kind of the room here that we don't really want to spend the money and we want Karen to maybe explore that option by Andrew? Something has to be done. It's just a matter of, is this the best use, or could you spend a little more to get even better uses? I'm just trying to figure out how to provide direction to Karen we obviously don't meet again for about a week and a half.
I think it's worth pursuing Andrew's idea. You think about costs you're going to incur over the next 5 years, let's say, for a 10-year-old model that Andrew found versus this new model. I mean, I think you're going to save yourselves possibly some money. I mean, you never know. You could buy something that has a lot of issues, but odds are you're probably going to spend a little bit less over time.
So this committee would support potentially an amount higher if the funding was available within the general operating budget, if it provided a longer term solution as opposed to, I don't know if you'd call this a Band-Aid, but that might be the right word.
Worth pursuing.
Jason, I would say I'm having a challenge with just figuring out, like, is it worth it or not? I mean, 15,000 does sound like it's a large sum for just repairing something that's, 27 years old and 160,000 miles, I think is what you said, something like that.
30, right? 30.
130 something.
Or it'll be 35 years old, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. Thank you. See, I can't even do the math quick enough. But, to think if there is, if there is a Mack brand trailer or whatever, an equivalent that, they can get for 20,000, which is 20 years newer or 15 years newer, that would seem like it could hold its value a little longer.
All right, so how about I move this, that the Capital Planning Committee recommend that the DPW director investigate potential used options to replace the 1986 Mack instead of repairing it. And should those efforts be unsuccessful in the required amount of time, capital planning will reconvene within the required notice of open meeting law to reassess the situation.
Yeah, Jason, I just don't want
Yeah,
to leave her.
Can I just have a second?
Yeah, second.
Second by Jeff. Go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry, I just don't want to leave her without a vehicle that she needs if that becomes an issue. So it's sooner rather than later, if we could get some reply back from her, I think, so we could decide the next step would probably be the best option.
Yeah, I mean, my intent would be, I can draft her a note. If we vote in favor of this, I could draft her a note tonight. Hopefully she could either at least connect with me or connect with Mark and Brian tomorrow. And that way we know whether we post a meeting for early next week, with that being the sole agenda topic. It's really, if this is the way the committee wants to go, we're going to have to just agree that at least 4 of us could get on a virtual room to have a quick discussion about what the findings were. But that makes sense.
Do we want to, if she needs one tomorrow, and you can go to Ryder or one of those places and rent one? I don't know what it costs.
Lisa, I don't know if you know, I mean, the initial email on this came on Wednesday, May 19th. And it came out of the Board of Selectmen Q3 review, is my understanding. So this is, I don't get the sense that this is like on life support sort of thing, but I also get the sense that action needs to be taken before June 30th is the sense I got.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion on the motion? All right. Roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Interneater,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. Next up is chair's update. So the space needs RFQ is out. That closes next week. There was a information session. There have been a series of questions that have come in from potential designers, and Ms. Esposito has been fielding a lot of those with Mr. Parent and Mr. Purple. So that will be the main agenda topic, and hopefully only agenda topic other than maybe meeting minutes at our next meeting. More details will come on that. This process is obviously going to be new to, I think, most of you in terms of scoring and how that works. So there will be very specific procedures that we'll have to follow leading into the meeting. We'll kind of bring our results to the meeting and compare notes with the intent of deciding who we would then interview. So there will not be interviews that night. It would be to decide who you want to interview based on, candidly, how many responses, are they the right responses, et cetera. So any questions on that? All right. School research subcommittee update. So as you can imagine, with school coming close to an end in some sense of normalcy coming back, the discussions are starting again related to a lot of the activities that have just candidly obviously taken longer than anyone would have wanted them to take, given everything else the schools have had to deal with. But as early as tomorrow, there will be a letter released from the subcommittee, the superintendent, the Board of Selectmen chair, town administrator, and I think I said superintendent, but also school committee chair, really just updating the community on where we stand and where we're going. And we do expect a decent amount of work to be done over the summer. And we are going to be asking the Board of Selectmen to extend the charge of that subcommittee through the end of the calendar year, so December 31st, with the intent of making some sort of recommendation and or seeking any necessary exploratory funding at the potential fall town meeting, right? So depending on what the next steps are and whether there's any funding, but that's kind of the actions between now and then. You will see on the June 15th Board of Selectmen agenda, Greg Martineau, the superintendent, is going to be going before them for their executive level support for the statement of interest related to Neary School. It's really to get in line should the town seek MSBA funding to either renovate, rehab, or build a new Neary School. Even if the state takes us up on the statement of interest, there's absolutely no binding commitment that the town needs to make as part of it. So it's really to get in line. There's differing feedback that the subcommittee has received, through our due diligence about how long that process could take, and it's all about available funding, right? So you can play through a few scenarios in your head about what happens with infrastructure packages in Washington and how the state decides to deal with that. Should schools be, listed? To be honest, the Democratic proposals have school infrastructure in there. The Republican packages do not currently, and I know there's obviously a lot of effort to try to reconcile those, but we just really are trying to put the town in a position to be able to pivot depending upon what becomes available and what the needs are of the school community, including a final demographic study that they've commissioned to really validate the NESDEC results, given the very different reports we all got in a 2-month time frame earlier this year. Any questions on that? All right, Andrew, I'm going to turn it to you for an update on the One Stop grant.
Sure. So I met with Karen and we started to work through the grant. But in looking through the feedback we got from the notice of intent, I'll read you a couple of things that it says that kind of cause us to pause for a second. The project will need to be advanced in design and permitting, in addition to identifying a leverage private development that is imminent. The full project will require details about shovel readiness, scope of construction work, timeline, etc., which we would have for Cordova, but for both the public infrastructure project and the specific private development. And so basically what it said is you have to be, it should only be submitted if in the infrastructure credit category, if and when It is ready to leverage and support imminent private development. So if South Union had passed, we might have been able to kind of tie in the Quarterville Road project with that. But without that project, we did not know of any imminent private development that would be going on anywhere near Quarterville Road. So the decision was to not submit that application.
Okay, any questions for Andrew? All right. Town meeting recap. So these items may blend together, but I'm gonna try to keep it focused in my ABC based on the agenda. So the first one was discussion and next steps on the proposed CIPC bylaw. So as everyone's probably aware, I think most were there, but not all. This article is indefinitely postponed when the advisory article was defeated. And, you know, my 2 cents is it's probably going to require a meeting of the Board of Selectmen, Advisory Committee, Capital Committee, and the moderator as the appointing authority of advisory to really hash out and figure out what the options are and, you know, have some sort of public hearing. I don't know if that's the right term, but really we all know, right? We talked about it at length in this meeting. Advisory talked about it at length. Board of Selectmen talked about it at length. And while they were listed agenda items, we obviously, no one got the feedback that, you know, was received candidly on town meeting floor. And I think we all have a responsibility to at least listen and digest it and figure out what's the appropriate path forward, potentially provide additional education to demystify some of the items that were raised. But also think about what's the right permanent membership of all of these committees, right? In terms of not only makeup, but I think size was a main question. And I think the one thing I have certainly thought about is, you know, moving forward, we obviously know what we did in year 1 as a ad hoc committee. And obviously I would hope that the BOS will continue to support it proceeding as an ad hoc committee when they do their reappointments this month. But, you know, what do we want it to be longer term and what's the vision of capital, right? Obviously advisory is a well-established committee in town. And, you know, I know there's different views that everyone has in terms of individually, but also what other towns do, right? A lot of other towns have capital type committees. Some call them planning, some call them other terms, including improvement. But, you know, we can certainly, happy to open the floor and discuss anything related to capital tonight. But I do think, you know, seeing that there are members of advisory here, there are members of the Board of Selectmen on this committee, it's going to take kind of everyone putting their heads together to, you know, what's the right path, but also giving people that didn't support at least the advisory bylaw changes a chance to be heard and decide, you know, what's the right path. I'm also cognizant there was only 125 voters out of, I don't know, probably north of 7,000 registered voters in this community that made that decision. So, you know, it could have just been, you know, the size of the group as well. So I'm going to pause, welcome any additional thoughts on specifically the path forward on a permanent CIPC bylaw.
I'd like to see it stay the same and be reintroduced next year and get support. I thought that I haven't been in town that long, but in the 5 years I've been here, I've heard more things thrown at advisory at the town meeting by a more select few than I understand why it seems to be so ingrained. I don't know why, you know, each year I seem to hear that people complaining that advisory is not independent enough, when the reality is that in order to make the decisions that advisory makes, it needs to have at least, you know, a finger in the pots to understand what's going on in each of these places. So maybe if somebody can explain to me why there's such this vehement, virile reaction by, you know, sort of a small segment of the population, because I run into people all the time and nobody ever complains to me that advisory is too invested. And anybody that, as I know, when I stood up the meeting and said so, I understand how important you guys are to this committee, how much work that you put in. And I don't understand why people don't seem to understand that in order to have the knowledge that you need to have, that you really do need to be a participant, not just a bystander.
Yep. No, I mean, Joe, I agree with you. Yeah. Speaking as an advisory member, I mean, I did after this kind of do some more research, and I found, I think 14, 15 towns at least in a quick period that have an advisory member on their planning committee or capital planning committee, including Northborough. Like it's not uncommon. It's very common. The only other one I saw is a lot of them have appointed by the moderator versus the board of selectmen. So maybe that's something we want to look at. But I was a little bit taken back by the advisory discussion.
To anyone that wants to come spend 3 or 4 hours on a Wednesday night, 14 weeks in a row, you're welcome to contact the moderator for my seat.
And a lot of people talk about, being ad hoc on this committee and, or not ad hoc, ex officio. And Brian and Mark certainly had a tremendous amount of knowledge, and obviously they can't be voting members because they're not town residents. But, I could personally, if with the amount of time that I spend on capital planning to not have a vote, I don't know if it's worth my time. I'll save my vote for advisory. And it's kind of a shame.
And I think the really important thing that I think got lost in the discussion, that I think got to a point of no return, is advisory members that are on capital planning could not vote based on the existing town bylaws on anything related to capital this year. So, I guess Andrew, I know you did the research. I would encourage you to share it with not only advisory, but the board of selectmen and members of this committee, just so other people can see what the other towns are. I also looked at Westboro. I think they have something very similar. And the more I've thought about this, we were having some duplicate meetings with the schools, right? School has their own capital planning committee. It's a subcommittee made up of elected school committee members. And now seeing that Northborough has a capital planning committee that includes a school committee member, I'm also just thinking about the bandwidth of our department heads, right? How many separate meetings they have to go to. I mean, Greg Martineau will probably tell you more often than not. I tell him, if there's a way to streamline the conversation, you only have to have it once instead of 4 times. I'm all in. I'm happy to save you those 3 hours, sort of thing. So, but I think the same goes for Brian and for Mark, right? They sometimes end up having to probably say the same thing 5 times to 5 different committees. So I do intend to look at, what the schools in particular, given they haven't had a ton of capital recently, but we can obviously read the tea leaves. Something's going to have to happen with Neary. So there's going to be some sizable decisions that impact everything else that's going on in the town. So,
yeah. And now Algonquin's got some big capital needs coming up. So maybe it's local school committee and Northborough, Southborough, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. So is there anything else anyone wants to talk about specific to the CIPC bylaw tonight? Okay. I guess I will keep everyone updated as advisory discusses, and Andrew, obviously you should too. And then Lisa, I think something to put on the BOS agenda of maybe, obviously not this 15th, but how we want to advance this, and knowing that there's going to be something that happens in the fall.
And I'll send around everybody just so you have it, like my list of 15 different bylaws that kind of made sense to why they had finance representation.
All right. Item B is a revised charge proposal for the Board of Selectmen. So I took a red line of our existing charge and just marked it up to continue it as an ad hoc. Some of the stuff just wasn't relevant anymore. Like, we obviously provided reports to the Board of Selectmen, but I'm not going to keep in there that we have a December 2020 deliverable for the next year. So I don't know if anyone had any changes or additional edits they wanted to add, but my goal was to give them something that they could work with as they decide, where they want to go, after 6:30.
That looked good.
Okay, so I guess I will move that the committee support the revised capital planning ad hoc committee charge for submission to the BOS.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, roll call, Braccio,
I think I'm gonna abstain on this one, Jason, because it's gonna come to the board and I'm gonna vote on it there. So
Okay.
I'll abstain.
Hark,
Aye.
Hinterneeder,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff.
Aye.
And Malinowski's aye. All right, now for 7C. This is actually obviously the first time we're going to get to do this, but as everyone knows, the capital discussion around the warrant articles, both as part of the general operating budget, the water fund, and CPA, was pretty light at town meeting. I think there was one amendment offered related to police cruisers, but everything else passed with basically little to no discussion, including the tender and the townhouse. I'm purposely excluding the CPA article related to St. Mark's because that is not a town-owned building, so it does not fall within our policy. So as everyone's aware, we have an oversight part of our charge. And the way that the charge is written is that the town administrator would make recommendations and that we would make requests of the BOS. Ultimately, it's up to the BOS to give us those oversight parameters, but we need to make the request. So I connected with Mark, and Brian was also on the exchange about kind of the list, the potential list for consideration by capital. And I would say that the items that I'm going to list off here, he's in agreement with. So I'll just list them and then we can discuss what you want to keep, what you want to remove, and if there's anything you want to add based on what was approved at town meeting. So the request currently, as at least I was thinking about it, is the Calander Field project that was funded by CPA, the townhouse project that would be funded by CPA, the fire tender, and the library renovations. Let me expand on that a little bit and then we'll open it up for around the horn. The CPA articles, CPA obviously has an oversight part of their work as well. The goal here would be that if ultimately those two articles were recommended for oversight, that we would work with, on Calander would be Rec, and obviously on Townhouse would be John Parent, to work through the entire process. So we basically deliver candidly, like with a bow on it, to CPA saying, we've already looked at this, beat up the invoices, beat up the process, and are delivering you kind of a finished product that's already been through a level review. They can choose to accept or deny based on their parameters, but really more creating a collaborative relationship and bringing, I think, the expertise that this committee really has in terms of project management, project oversight, process related to, just the bids, evaluating the work of contractors and evaluating whether, invoices should be recommended for payment or whether there should be, holdbacks until the appropriate work is done. So that was my thought on the CPA articles, is that this wouldn't be at all in lieu of anything that they typically do. It would just be done in advance of anything going to them for their normal process. And obviously with the hopes that it bolsters their confidence in what's being brought forward as opposed to hinders it in any way. In addition, I purposely left off the townhouse bathrooms in the IT infrastructure, not because I don't want to know what's going on there, but I think there's a lot of other people already poking around at it. So what I was going to recommend there is that we get regular reports of the expenses that are accrued against those projects, but not necessarily go to what I'd call a full oversight role. And the reason I think that we still need to be aware of the expenses. Is everyone's aware there's going to be a townhouse bathroom project that comes in front of us again next year? So we need to be able to make a recommendation of whether that's the right amount, whether it should be more, whether it should be less. And we all know that the IT infrastructure was pretty broad. And while I'm not aware of any deep expertise on this committee to evaluate what they do, we are going to have to make a recommendation to future town meetings about additional infrastructure needs that they have. So I guess my view is I want to be made aware of what they're spending the money on, but I don't necessarily feel the need to rubber stamp it before it's done. So I'm going to pause. Andrew, I'm going to start with you and see if you have any thoughts. So I want to hear additions, right list, or removals.
What about the Algonquin stuff? Or you mean the stuff that's just for this year?
It's just this year. So basically
Got
now there's money that's approved. Now we have an oversight responsibility to make sure it's spent the right way.
No, I think the list you had is the right one.
All right. Joe?
I think it's a good list. Other than that, I think I'd have to think about it a little more.
We're gonna have to set up what the process is once we figure out that these are the projects, but
Yes.
is that what you're referring to?
Part of it, yes. Yes. I
Okay.
mean, they're definitely some, the difference between, say, the fire tender, Callander, and townhouse, there's definitely some different styles of projects. So I'm
Yes.
interested in what everybody else is thinking.
Okay, Steve?
I was going to say the same thing as far as I can't think of any other, like any additions to it. The library seems like a fairly straightforward, almost a one invoice type of thing with just the replacement of the carpeting. But I could be mistaken on that. So I was going to say that might be the only one that maybe to delete, but having oversight over that, I think would be helpful, just to make sure that we're understanding the overall cost, just making sure that it's being spent the right way.
Yeah, I don't know. It's probably more than one invoice, just the way these projects tend to work out, but it's probably the same company. It could even be a state bid list item, as I believe that one. I've become pretty familiar, probably more familiar than I ever wanted to be with procurement laws. Is really just in local governments. So I think it's also an education for us as we think and work towards. We obviously have a pretty sizable project with the townhouse, but as we work towards naturally longer, bigger duration projects, whether it be a school, library, community center, it kind of just allows you to kind of understand the ins and the outs of what these department heads work through to bring something forward. And I actually think gives you a better appreciation of what they have to work through to actually bring forward something, and why sometimes the pricing seems very fair and sometimes why it seems a lot higher than what you or I would pay to do the same thing in our own properties. Jeff?
I don't think I have really much else to add from what's already been said, so I think that makes sense.
Okay. Lisa?
So, I don't disagree with the list. The only concern I have is CPC is a little different than some of the items on here as far as their oversight. And I would certainly think a conversation with CPC about this, because the last thing I would want is for them to think their toes may be stepped on, or have a very different idea of what capital should or shouldn't be doing with them. And I think that's probably a discussion before we go down this path. And again, I understand the reason for putting it on here and just giving additional oversight. I get it. But I just think we should probably talk to CPC based on, they have their own oversight as well, just to make sure we can work collaboratively together. I guess that's my point.
And if that wasn't clear, that was my intent, but I guess you're saying before it goes to the BOS, you would like that conversation to occur.
Yeah, I don't want to create a problem that doesn't need to be there. That's all.
So I will say, like Mr. Parent, for example, is already going out with the RFQ for, OPM on the townhouse. That's not something CPC ever collaborates with them on. And that's candidly, right? Like I have utmost confidence in John, but I'll be honest, like one of my first questions is, yes, they're going out for an OPM in the townhouse, but should we be going out for an OPM more broadly? Like, right? And that's just the things that if we continue to operate in this silo mentality, right, we're going to spend twice as much or redo processes 5 times because we're not connecting the dots, right? So if we're going to go out for an OPM on townhouse and we know we've got 3 other things that are going to need an OPM in the next year, like, why aren't we doing it together, right? And finding someone that gets to know us as Southborough, right? We are unique. Let's just face it, right? Like we have our own unique standards, like every other town probably in the state does. So that's really what I was hoping to achieve by that, but I hear the point. So I will try to get with Andrew on that, Andrew Mills, that is, to see what we can't do. But do we want to vote subject to that? Just so we don't have to bring this back again? Okay. So I will move that capital planning support the request of the BOS subject to a conversation with CPA related to the 2021 annual town meeting capital items for oversight responsibility. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Hinton,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. For a future meeting, I owe the committee kind of the oversight template from Public Safety Building and how we would look at this. But I think what I would ask all of you to think about is Joe, I think it was Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, like wide variety, right? You got a piece of fire apparatus, you've got a construction project, and you've got some renovations in a recreation field. So if there's anything that anyone believes they have either the expertise, right? Because I'm thinking we have one committee member assigned per project, right? And committee members can serve on multiple projects, but then they would just bring status updates back to the committee, as opposed to, I wouldn't think that all 6 of us as currently constituted would weigh in on every single one. It would be more to hear updates about the projects and to understand how it's going. Now, if we got a larger scale building project, that's going to be a separate committee all in itself. So does that make sense? So I guess ask you to think about what if any of those anyone's interested in being involved with. Joe, next one's for you. Review of latest capital request form templates. So I know we gave you some homework after the last meeting. If you want to give us an overview of where you're at.
Yes, I went and had meetings with Chief Achilles and John Parent. Went really well. And I think I came away with some things that we've seen and some things that they understand and form some consensus as to and good practices on both ends. Chief Achilles did send around a form that they had used in another town, which I think was pretty helpful. I think there were some interesting components that would be good to incorporate, and certainly we can incorporate them very efficiently with certain types of platforms. So if we're using drop downs with funding, we can have all those funding options put into one spot and then match that with timelines for financing, things like that, which I think would be a great way to go. The equipment one obviously is going to be far more clean cut. I think we all realize that most equipment purchases tend to have a very sharp focus and tend to be very more simpler in financing and participation. So that's why I think with the equipment one, absolutely we go with sort of a one-page model, and then we can use, say, a second drop down for either department heads or for us personally. The other thing is when we're integrating some of the information into whatever platform we're going to use for the town, which we're looking at what we have now, we'll have to understand how easily it'll be to transport. So starting out with a simpler template will actually make that easier as well, especially when you start to try and define qualitative issues. Those are not going to be as cleanly transferable into developing the capital plan, and keeping the capital plan sort of uncluttered will also be important. So I think, although qualitative is very necessary for us making decisions, it's not necessarily going to be as necessary for transporting that into the plan itself. John Parent probably said something that we've seen so much of, and probably one of the most poignant parts, which is that every single project that we see is sort of an ongoing process of changes, whether in terms of what's going into it, locations. For instance, just to give myself a little perspective, we talked about how many people were interested in a town pool. And I said, well, if I took the project form and I was just trying to spitball a town pool, how would that look? And I realized that those sorts of things are going to end up going through lots of committees. So even if we endorse it, it's going to have to go through other committees that are then going to lend judgment on certain major aspects of it. And so therefore getting too detailed, especially in initial forms, is probably just asking people to go through too many hoops, and is probably going to end up confusing us. Because if we just think of the location of a town pool and we sort of ask people, well, where are you going to put it? They might put down 3 or 4 different places, because in the end, it's going to be more of a community involved process to determine that. And so we might think a town pool is a great idea, but a lot of these facets are going to be determined by other committees at other times. So I think in terms of the project form, simplifying that, at least in context for submissions, makes a lot of sense, which is why both of these worksheets were set up with what I thought should be a primary face for each one of the issues that we can draw upon. And as Chief Achilles says, sometimes, that 1-page summary helps to facilitate, what you really need to know versus all the rest of the things that we may talk about in committee, but you don't necessarily need on a page when you're proposing it or putting it on the 10-year plan. But I think it would be a good discussion if people want to talk about any adjustments to those types of issues, or what they think is important that should be on that front page, or what could be on that front page. And we can obviously accommodate a lot more with certain types of drop down boxes, but I would be very hesitant to do include too many qualitative elements in a summary page, because then it just gets cut off or it takes up too much space. So simpler is better for that particular type of viewing and understanding.
So I guess, Joe, I'll offer comments after the committee goes around, but just wanted to continue to thank you, obviously, to find the time to rejigger this and also take the feedback from the department heads, which I think is what we were looking to get, because they're ultimately going to be the ones that have to populate this. So I just wanted to thank you for kind of the continued effort here, and I guess we'll open it up to commentary. I will start with Steve.
I'm not sure that I have a lot to offer on it. I mean, as I read through it, I think it was well laid out. So I'm not sure that I have a lot to offer on this at the moment.
Jeff?
All right, I was on mute. No, Joe, I really appreciate everything you're doing on this, I guess, first and foremost. Yeah, I don't think I really have anything to add at this point either, honestly. I mean, Joe, you're asking all the right questions. You're doing all the hard work on this, and I think you're absolutely on the right track. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
Lisa?
I second exactly what Jeff said, Joe. I think you've done a tremendous amount of work here and a tremendous job. And I think you're certainly on the right path to moving this forward. So I have nothing further other than to say thank you.
Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Again, I would say, what we do in the private sector when we do our capital long-term forecasting for projects is we do, depending on the project, we'll have, is it a ROM or a rough order of magnitude, which has usually a plus or minus 200%. So it's, for some of these projects that John's talking about, like, I don't know, a pool is, I don't know, $5 million, right? Could be 10 million, could be, so, kind of around the pricing that you put, what's your level of certainty? So we have rough order magnitude, then we have quote, which is plus or minus 20%. So it's like, how much closer are you getting? Do we have a quote in hand? Like, we've actually bid out a road project, right? And we have the quote and we know what it is, or do we have a estimated quote, which maybe has a plus or minus 20%, but more on the plus side, right? Because you want to hedge your bets up. And then you have a rough order magnitude that could be just a finger in the air guess, right? So I think maybe that would be the only thing I would say is to kind of cover John's piece, you can kind of qualify the dollar amount you're going to put in there with your comfortability with what that is.
That makes perfect sense.
And Joe, maybe Andrew, do you have anything else?
I think that's good.
So Joe, I think the feedback you got, like I said, was very valuable. And maybe I'll add two things that haven't been said is one on the vehicles. Yep. I think if we have that should be very we should be able to standardize that, whether it's a DPW vehicle, fire apparatus, police cruisers, et cetera. Like, I just think about when Chief Paulus had to get up at town meeting, right? And once he started listing off the mileages of the vehicles he was replacing, right, the conversation stopped. Right. And I just think if, we could create just a simple, like if we take the vehicle one you have, right, and look at who has vehicles next year, I think it's DPW, fire, and police will always, I think, have one unless there's something happens in terms of their cycle. Just like actually do a beta test, right? Like have them fill it out, right? And let those departments, and then let those departments provide us feedback, but also let us provide feedback of, yeah, now I have the right information. I'm not going and searching 5 different emails that maybe the department had sent the committee. And it really becomes what I'll call a living document, right? So think about that fire chief vehicle, right? How many conversations has this committee had since March of 2020 about that led to the discussion at town meeting? If we had logged those discussions, now look, it's up here, it's in the meeting minutes, right? But if we just kind of logged that, if someone had really challenged it, right, and not looked at the vetting that we had done, then you would at least have that track, right, that then becomes a public document as part of our minutes as we vet these projects, which is why I think it then leads to the John Parent comment of what Andrew was just saying is, I'm just thinking for bigger projects, if there is a placeholder, it's a paragraph of, this is an estimate of when we think, like I'll use the library as another example, right? This is an estimate of when we think the library building construction grant cycle may open again. This is a placeholder. There's been no due diligence done about it. And until something changes, that's the description that's carried as part of our capital plan and narrative. Because I'm also thinking about, there was a process that, we went through at a final meeting, but Mark and Brian and I had to spend time before that meeting to get descriptions for each of these warrant articles, right? Like there was a paragraph for each of these things. I kind of am thinking now, like if we had just had a description that we had already vetted and didn't have to kind of reinvent the wheel on a lot of these, right? It just, again, saves time when all these things have to come together for a warrant. I mean, the town had the benefit of 2 months this year to get, to put all the ducks in a row for the warrant. We're not going to hopefully have that next year, right? We'll be at a March town meeting and have to have all the descriptions cohesive. So I would think a general project form for something that doesn't fit in the vehicle or equipment bucket, that's just broad, that provides one paragraph where it's at, and then we can use it as a tracking mechanism, may also be very helpful here to achieve, I think, the goal that we're looking to accomplish.
Yes. And I do totally understand the need for a measure of qualitative input, and that being very important, because and obviously your distinction of the difference is absolutely spot on important. I mean, for instance, Chief Achilles said, well, how about a picture? And that was a great thing for the vehicles. It made it very apparent what you were buying, what was doing it. It took up some of the part of it needing a description, but for projects, that is not really gonna work. So I definitely took that away from discussions prior and now. So I like that too.
Joe, I'm gonna take a look. I remember seeing one when we were looking at different capital planning committees when we were starting this up. One town that did their capital, like their annual, I don't know, book.
Mhm.
And they had like a one-page presentation for each capital item with a picture of the item
Yes.
that they present at town meeting.
Yes.
I'm not sure which town that was, but I thought of something like that. Like we would want to track it in an Excel spreadsheet for us, but have the data in a format that we could pull into a PowerPoint pretty easily, which, you know, you just link the cells, do like kind of like a mail merge with the image and just kind of put together a PowerPoint presentation of all the different pieces.
Yes. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I remember looking through that. It was like page 40, or it was, you had to read through a bunch of it. But
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff, and they had a bunch of stuff on the charter, and then there was like the pages they presented at town meeting, and I was like, that's, if we just put that on the screen, when we're finally back in the auditorium, I think that would go a long way.
Yes, and that actually goes along with what Chief Achilles' conversation was like when he pulled out that form. And it does work very well for that. So if we sort of keep it in that mode, at least, where we're going to obviously want more for certain things, but to keep sort of that one page summary as we're talking about, that you can easily just pop up, that answers most people's questions. I think you guys I'm on the same page with you guys.
I mean, I think if we did a presentation at the beginning of town meeting with the screen and said, police car 1, 130,000 miles, police car 2, 116,000 miles, and we show it, missing a bumper, they're going to be like, okay.
Yes, and yeah, and that the forms that at least the worksheets that we're working off of, I think, have that on there for that sort of a purpose. The reason purchase for sale, whether it's a replacement, those sorts of things are in that. So.
And I would say, Joe, on the financing questions, I think we should, obviously the department heads aren't going to be able to weigh in on that, right? I think that would be more of a section like for use by town treasurer in collaboration with whoever else.
Yeah, I mean, it could, yes, depending on how we structure it, it could always fall off. The only reason why I put that there was because, at least, I mean, especially for somebody like me, when I'm looking at that, a timeline and the funding, I don't know all the grant types of programs. And so for them to put it in, or an addendum, when I was doing that sort of suggestion of doing a pool, and I was thinking about how that would work, I also came in with the fact that you probably would sell memberships, and so therefore you'd have an operational funding from that may also play into the component. And so there were some reasons why I thought that sort of putting those things on that page might still make sense, although dropping them off the page for something like town meeting would make a lot of sense too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Joe, what we do, and what I do is for those kinds of projects in my day-to-day, are those revenue generating, right?
Yes.
It's a flag, and then you put a dollar amount with some kind of return on investment.
Yes.
Which certainly helps. If it's self-funding expense, I mean, geez, we'd be happy to do those all day, right?
Yes. And yeah, so I mean, when we're building the timeline, we don't have to build it onto the prospectus sheet. But certainly I thought that putting it on a table like that was probably going to be very helpful for us when we start doing work, and also for inputting data and exporting data. So it's just something that I thought would be good to include. I guess the question moving from here, since we seem to have a general consensus around a lot of the material, is the next step forward would be to figure out the medium under which we want to put these together, what would be the best medium to also export to the system that we want to use, and how we want to use it. And I'm not sure that I'm the best person to suggest that. I guess talking to the company that supplies the software, and to our new tech department. I mean, he just came in, so he's new, so he might have some perspective as to whether he does, to what platforms would be best for us to use.
Yeah, I have some ideas, Joe, but I think Jay is obviously best suited as our new IT director for how to do this. I'm just very cognizant of everything that he probably has on his plate. So maybe what I'll do is I can take the action item of talking to Mark and Brian, seeing where this would fall on a priority list, and depending upon how long it may take to get to, then we can kind of come back in our next meeting and discuss what our options are, because our next agenda item that we're going to talk about here before we wrap up is, FY23 capital. We have to start kind of, I'll call it, doing a capital call to each of the department heads and saying, revisit your plan. Like, where are you at? What needs to come forward? What can go back? And start to kind of come up with what our process is going to be. But I think to do that with the department heads, we have to, if we're going to want information or presentations, we need to be upfront with them, as opposed to asking them halfway through the year, oh yeah, by the way, can we have this now that you've come to us 3 times and already talked about the topic? And in worst case, I think, is we create a fillable PDF for the first year, right?
Yeah.
That just is a standard form or Google form, or pick your form. That the website also has a form function. It's not that great. But I think there are some easy solutions if we don't get the attention from an IT that we would need on this topic.
Sure. Yes. And I totally think that's doable, plausible, and probably the way we should go. The only caveat that I would throw out is, even though Jason may be too busy to deal with us, knowing what he would recommend, as, because we're obviously going to want to filter all this later. So just what we can use as sort of a bland platform to throw it, just that's just so that nobody else has to do it again, or we have to have somebody retype all the forms. That's
I mean, if we wanted to do a Google form, like, I can help set up something like that, relatively simple. And then I think to Joe's point, what's the strategic solution? It's probably a conversation, Brian, that we'd want to have with you and Carla. Like, do we need a fixed assets tracking software that we could use, to track our current, and when is the replacement date? How late are we tracking it? What's the annual mileage? Things of that nature, or do we, is that something that Carla would need and the finance team would need, or is that something that the capital team is the only one that needs that? And then obviously it's an easier decision on what kind of software suite or package we would want.
All right. I already kind of, so Joe, I think, let me see what Jay's bandwidth is. If he can give us a quick 5-minute answer of go look at this, or whether it's a more advanced conversation. But I do think between Andrew and myself, I think we have some ideas.
Sure.
I'm probably not as technically savvy as Jay, obviously, but some workable solutions to keep advancing this. I'm going to move to item 9, FY23 capital timeline and next steps. I was going to let Mark and Brian decompress from town meeting and take a breather before going into this, but we've obviously lost 2 months from where we normally would be in terms of coming out of an annual town meeting. And while I'm not aware of anything for a fall town meeting, I'm not naive to think that something won't pop from a need for fall capital. So what I am looking to do is I will come up with a timeline that Mark feels comfortable approaching department heads on, to do this sort of capital reassessment, i.e. provide the department head with what we're carrying currently coming out of last year, whether the dollars need to be adjusted, whether it's still the right year, and they had to add a year on to their capital plan now too, right? Like, we lost year 10, right? Everything's now up to year 9. So really come up with a process that we can come back to the committee with, of saying this is going to be the timeline, so that we can start to have them, do their heavy lifting, soliciting quotes if they need to reassess where they're at over the summer, so that we can start to meet with them, for them to kind of come in and present each of the items they're looking for in FY23, but also to articulate any changes or additions beyond FY23. Because, to be honest, obviously that Mack truck we talked about earlier in the discussion, the meeting is on no one's radar yet. It wouldn't be if you looked at the capital plan, but it obviously deserves, attention, right? So I think, having those conversations too, of where they're being maybe too conservative and, need some attention or thoughts of how to re-engineer their plan, is obviously where we're looking to also have discussions on. So that is forthcoming, but I want to give them some time to think about how best to approach the department heads, especially as you head into kind of the height of vacation season here. Any other thoughts on that? Public comment. Is there any public comment? I am seeing none. Any other business that the committee wants to conduct this evening? All right. I will move that we adjourn.
Second.
Seconded by Andrew. Roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Interneater,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Bath.
Aye.